In the heart of downtown Los Angeles, nestled between towering office buildings and trendy boutiques, sat the Laurel Room, an upscale restaurant known for its exceptional cuisine, sophisticated ambiance, and A-list clientele. With its floor-to-ceiling windows, handcrafted wooden furniture, and subtle lighting, it exuded an air of quiet luxury that made it a favorite among Hollywood's elite. Sarah Miller had landed a job as a waitress at the Laurel Room just 3 weeks ago. Fresh out of UCLA with a theater degree and dreams of making it big in Hollywood, she saw this job as her ticket to networking with the right people. The pay was good, the tips were better, and the possibility of serving someone who could change her life kept her motivation high despite the demanding hours. "Table 7 needs water," barked Marcus, the floor manager, as he breezed past Sarah. "And try to smile more. This isn't a funeral home." Sarah forced a smile and grabbed a pitcher of water. She had quickly learned that working at the Laurel Room meant maintaining a certain image, poised, efficient, and invisible unless needed. The restaurant's mysterious owner, whom she had never met, apparently insisted on impeccable service above all else. "Did you hear?" whispered Tanya, another waitress, as they passed each other. "Helen says the owner might stop by tonight. No one's seen him in months." Sarah shrugged. "I'll believe it when I see it." The evening rush was in full swing. Businessmen closing deals over scotch, couples celebrating anniversaries, and the occasional celebrity hiding behind designer sunglasses. Sarah moved between tables with practiced efficiency, her actor's memory serving her well as she recalled complicated orders without writing them down. As the night wore on, the crowd thinned. Sarah was calculating her tips when the front door opened, admitting a rush of cool evening air and a solitary figure. She glanced up, expecting to see another well-dressed patron, but instead saw a man who looked decidedly out of place in the Laurel Room's elegant setting. He wore faded jeans, scuffed motorcycle boots, and a plain black t-shirt under a well-worn leather jacket. His dark hair fell to his shoulders, and several days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. He carried a motorcycle helmet under one arm. Sarah raised an eyebrow. The Laurel Room had a strict dress code. She watched as Marcus approached the man, expecting him to be politely turned away. To her surprise, Marcus's usually rigid posture relaxed, and he smiled genuinely before leading the man to a small table in Sarah's section. "Take good care of him," Marcus muttered as he passed her, heading back to his post. Sarah approached the table, menu in hand. Up close, there was something familiar about the man's face, the strong jawline, the intense dark eyes. She couldn't quite place him, but she was certain she'd seen him before. "Good evening, sir," she said, placing the menu before him. "Can I start you with something to drink?" The man looked up at her with kind eyes. "Just water for now, thanks." His voice was soft, almost melodic, with a distinct laid-back cadence. Sarah nodded and turned away, puzzled by Marcus's unusual deference to someone who looked like he'd be more at home in a dive bar than an upscale restaurant. When she returned with his water, the man was gazing around the restaurant with a thoughtful expression. "Are you ready to order?" Sarah asked. "What would you recommend?" he asked, looking up at her with gentle curiosity. "The pan-seared scallops are excellent," she replied automatically. "Though personally, I think the mushroom risotto is our best dish." He smiled, and Sarah was struck by how it transformed his entire face. "Mushroom risotto it is, then." As Sarah turned to place his order, a boisterous group entered the restaurant. 4 men in expensive suits, laughing loudly and already slightly intoxicated. Sarah suppressed a groan. It was 15 minutes to closing, and large parties always meant staying late. "I know it's late," the leader of the group declared to Marcus, "but surely you can accommodate us? We just closed a 7-figure deal." Their table was also in Sarah's section, directly adjacent to the quiet man in the leather jacket. As she took their drink orders, top-shelf whiskey all around, she couldn't help noticing how they kept glancing at her solitary customer with barely concealed disdain. "What's with the homeless guy?" one of them muttered, loud enough to be heard. "Thought this place had standards." Sarah tensed, but the man in the leather jacket didn't react, calmly sipping his water as if he hadn't heard. When she brought the risotto to his table, the businessman's comments had grown even less subtle. "Maybe he won the lottery," another one suggested with a snicker. probably his first time eating somewhere without a drive-through window. Sarah placed the risotto before the quiet man and whispered, "I'm sorry about them. Would you like to move to another table?" He shook his head. "No need. I'm fine here." There was no anger in his voice, only a serene calm that Sarah found impressive, given the increasingly rude comments. The evening progressed painfully. The businessmen ordered expensive bottles of wine and the priciest items on the menu, loudly discussing their wealth and connections, while occasionally throwing mocking glances at the biker nearby. The quiet man finished his risotto, ordered coffee, and sat peacefully, occasionally making notes in a small notebook he had pulled from his jacket pocket. When Sarah brought his check, curiosity got the better of her. "I hope you enjoyed your meal, despite the ambiance," she said, nodding subtly toward the rowdy table. "It was excellent," he replied. "You were right about the risotto." One of the businessmen, emboldened by alcohol, called out, "Hey buddy, if you need help with that check, we might have some spare change." His companions roared with laughter. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment on behalf of the quiet man. To her surprise, he smiled at her conspiratorially. "What would you do in this situation?" he asked her softly. Sarah blinked, caught off guard by the question. "I'd probably tell them to mind their own business," she admitted, "but I need this job." "Fair enough," he nodded, understanding in his eyes. He signed the check, leaving a tip that made Sarah's eyes widen. As he stood to leave, he paused, looking at the boisterous table. After a moment of contemplation, he walked directly over to them. The table fell silent as he approached. The leader of the group, a red-faced man with slick-back hair, looked up with an expression of amused disdain. "Gentlemen," the quiet man said, his voice surprisingly authoritative despite its softness, "I couldn't help overhearing your conversation. It sounds like you've had a successful day." The businessmen exchanged glances, clearly unsure how to respond to this unexpected interaction. "Yeah, we closed a big deal," the leader finally said. "What's it to you?" "Nothing at all," the quiet man replied. "I just wanted to offer my congratulations. Success is worth celebrating." He paused, then added, "And perhaps share a perspective if you're open to it." "What perspective could you possibly offer us?" another man scoffed. The quiet man smiled. "That true wealth isn't measured by the price of your watch or the size of your deal. It's measured by how you treat people, especially those you think can do nothing for you." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. The quiet man nodded politely and turned away, heading for the exit. As he reached the door, Marcus rushed forward. "Mr. Reeves," Marcus called out, "before you go, could you take a look at the proposal for the kitchen renovation?" The quiet man nodded. "Send it to my email, Marcus, and good work tonight. The service was excellent." Sarah froze, her brain suddenly making the connection. Keanu Reeves. The quiet, humble man in the leather jacket was Keanu Reeves, world-famous actor and, apparently, the owner of the Laurel Room. The businessmen's table had gone deathly silent, their faces ashen as they realized who they had been mocking all evening. The leader looked like he might be sick. "Did he say Reeves?" one whispered hoarsely. "As in Keanu Reeves?" Sarah couldn't help the small, vindictive smile that crept onto her face as she approached their table. "Can I get you gentlemen anything else?" she asked sweetly. The next morning, Sarah arrived early for her shift, still replaying the previous night's events in her mind. She found Marcus in the office, reviewing reservation lists. "So," she said, leaning against the doorframe, "were you ever going to tell us that Keanu Reeves owns this place?" Marcus looked up, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "We don't advertise it. He prefers it that way. He bought the restaurant about 5 years ago when the previous owner, an old friend of his, was facing bankruptcy. And he just shows up like that, in jeans and a t-shirt? That's Keanu for you," Marcus shrugged. "He's not interested in the status or recognition. He cares about the food, the atmosphere, and how we treat people. That's why our hiring process is so rigorous. He wants staff who are genuine, not just looking for celebrity connections." Sarah felt a twinge of guilt, knowing that networking had been a significant factor in her desire to work at the Laurel Room. "Is he upset with me?" she asked hesitantly. "I didn't recognize him." "Upset?" Marcus laughed. "Quite the opposite. He left a note saying you provided excellent service without knowing who he was. That's exactly what he values. He particularly appreciated your recommendation and your apology for the other customer's behavior. Relief washed over Sarah. So I still have a job? More than that, Marcus handed her an envelope. He left this for you. Sarah opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a handwritten note. Thank you for your kind service and genuine recommendation. The mushroom risotto was indeed excellent. I appreciated your professionalism in a difficult situation. I've instructed Marcus to adjust your schedule if you need time for auditions. The Laurel Room has always been a place where artists can find stable work while pursuing their dreams. We all start somewhere. Sarah stared at the note, speechless. There was also a business card for a well-known casting director with a note saying, "Tell her Keanu suggested you call." How did he? She began. He notices things, Marcus said simply, and he believes in giving people chances. The restaurant door opened, and the red-faced businessman from the previous night entered, looking considerably more humble than he had before. We're not open yet, Marcus began, but the man raised his hand. I know, he swallowed hard. I wanted to apologize for my behavior last night and to leave this. He placed an envelope on the counter. It's a donation to Mr. Reeves' children's charity. Please make sure he gets it. Marcus nodded, taking the envelope. I'll ensure he receives it. The businessman hesitated. And please tell him he was right about what matters. After he left, Sarah turned to Marcus with wonder in her eyes. Does this kind of thing happen often? Marcus smiled. More often than you'd think. That's the thing about Keanu. He changes people not by preaching, but by being exactly who he is. He handed her an apron. Now, we've got a restaurant to open. As Sarah tied her apron, she glanced around the Laurel Room with new eyes. The elegant simplicity, the warm atmosphere, the emphasis on genuine service, it all reflected the man who owned it. A man who could have flaunted his fame and fortune, but chose instead to sit quietly in jeans and enjoy a simple risotto. In that moment, Sarah realized she had received something far more valuable than a potential acting connection. She had been given a living example of how to move through the world with grace, humility, and kindness, regardless of status or circumstance. And as the first customers of the day began to arrive, Sarah greeted them with a genuine smile, no longer acting the part of a sophisticated waitress, but simply being herself, which, she was beginning to understand, was more than enough. In the weeks that followed, Sarah noticed subtle changes in her approach to both her work and her auditions. She stopped trying to impress people with what she thought they wanted to see, and instead focused on authenticity. Surprisingly, this led to more callbacks than she'd ever received before. The story of Keanu Reeves' quiet ownership of the Laurel Room remained largely unknown to the public, but among the staff, it created a culture of genuine service and mutual respect. On the rare occasions when he visited, he never announced himself, never expected special treatment, and always left generous tips along with handwritten notes of appreciation. 6 months later, Sarah landed a supporting role in an independent film. On her last day at the Laurel Room, her fellow servers threw her a small celebration after closing time. "Speech!" called Tanya, raising a glass of champagne. Sarah looked around at the faces that had become like family to her. "I came here looking for connections," she admitted. "But what I found was something much more valuable, a lesson in how to be in this world. In Hollywood, it's easy to get caught up in appearances and status. But working here, seeing how someone like Keanu Reeves conducts himself, it showed me another way." She raised her glass. "To the Laurel Room and to its owner, who taught me that how you treat people when the cameras aren't rolling is what truly matters." As if summoned by her words, the door opened and Keanu himself walked in, dressed in his characteristic simple attire. A collective gasp went around the room, followed by warm greetings. "Did I miss the party?" he asked with a smile. "Not at all," Marcus replied. "We're celebrating Sarah's new role and sending her off with our best wishes." Keanu turned to Sarah. "Congratulations, I heard about the film. It's got a great director." "Thank you," Sarah said, finding her voice, "for everything." He nodded, understanding the depth of her gratitude. "Remember what you learned here," he said quietly. "In this industry, in any industry really, success can either separate you from others or connect you more deeply to them. The choice is always yours." As the evening wound down, Keanu spoke individually with each staff member, remembering details about their lives that they had mentioned in passing during his previous visits. When he finally left, riding away on his motorcycle into the Los Angeles night, he left behind not just a successful restaurant, but a community of people who had learned that true character is revealed in how you treat others when you think no one important is watching. For Sarah, standing on the threshold of her new career, it was a lesson she would carry with her always, that genuine kindness and humility were not weaknesses in a cutthroat world, but rather the foundation of a life truly well lived. And whenever she encountered arrogance or pretension in her new world, she would think of a quiet man in a leather jacket, unrecognized yet completely comfortable in his own skin, and she would smile, knowing that real power lay not in demanding respect, but in giving it freely to every person you meet. Years later, when Sarah had several films under her belt and was interviewing for a magazine profile, the journalist asked her about her big break and who had most influenced her career. "My big break," Sarah smiled. "It wasn't landing my first role. It was serving mushroom risotto to a man in a leather jacket who taught me that how you treat the waiter matters more than how you treat the director." She paused, remembering. "I worked at a restaurant owned by Keanu Reeves, though most people didn't know he was the owner. He never announced it, never used it for publicity. He just quietly created a space where people were valued for their character, not their status." The journalist looked intrigued. "And that influenced your acting?" "It influenced everything," Sarah replied. "Acting is about truth, about authentic human connection. Keanu showed me what that looks like off-screen, which made it possible for me to find it on screen." As the interview concluded, the journalist asked one final question. "If you could say something to Keanu Reeves now, what would it be?" Sarah thought for a moment, then smiled. "I'd thank him for teaching me that the most important audience isn't the one that buys tickets to your movies. It's the person right in front of you, deserving of your full attention and respect, no matter who they are or what they can do for you." She paused. "And I'd tell him the mushroom risotto really was excellent." And somewhere in Los Angeles, perhaps sitting unrecognized in a corner booth of the Laurel Room, Keanu Reeves might have smiled at that, knowing his quiet example had rippled outward in ways he could never have anticipated. Through Sarah, through the humbled businessman, through all the people who encountered the restaurant's unique atmosphere of unpretentious excellence and genuine warmth. Because that's the thing about kindness and humility. They work their magic not through grand gestures or public acclaim, but through the quiet, consistent choice to see the humanity in every person you meet, whether they're serving your food or sitting beside you in the spotlight. And in a world increasingly obsessed with status and appearance, that might be the most revolutionary act of all.